Okay, so going back, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so going back, um, take two. They, well, the life at that time is very simple, okay, because there, the existence at the time is only based on what they they need. Okay, like the very important job at the time is farming. Okay, because you have to feed the people living in the community, and military, being a military. Why? Because these are the people who's going to protect the farmers while people are working, and there must be somebody who will be protecting them. So the budget at the time is only allotted for military oil protection and for basic work like farming. The origin of that is actually based on the social contract theory. Like, well, of course, we are afraid of somebody, so the only way to so that we will sleep uh, well at night is to hire somebody who can protect us. Okay, so that's why military was created, or security. So the feudal lords were formed because of the need. Since farmers cannot protect themselves, every now and then they're afraid that somebody might get their harvest, so they hire somebody who will protect them. And in return, they have to pay tribute. Okay, so that is in a form now of later it became a part of the tax system we have. Okay, so lately, because of the development, because of the different needs in life, then there are many jobs created, and the budget now is no longer for military or farming, but was created for a more important projects like construction of roads for farmers to transport their products. Okay, so the medieval finance, okay, feudalism, which is in 395 AD to 1500, public finance in the Middle Ages, which is to raise revenue expenditures. There are two levels, as I explained. Okay, the king, or the central government, and the feudal lords. Okay, the king is like a ruler of the state, and it is also divided into different feudal lords. Okay, and this Hello. Hello. Um, can we can you call later because I'm having a Zoom meeting? I'll just end because my connection will be interrupted if I answer the phone. Okay. Okay, Robert. Okay. Okay. So I guess somebody called me and it will be interrupted. Is it okay now? Now the king, okay, is like the leader now collects the tax. Is in return he also protects the people under him. Okay, so in during the medieval public finance, the time of the feudal lords, the end of that is the beginning now of the capitalism. Okay, we know capitalism is more on business. Okay, if you are good in business, then you will become rich. Okay, as opposed to communism, okay, which is most of the income is given by the government. Now there are systems that governs during the time. We have mercantilism, commercialism, and physiocracy. Okay, so in the 1300 to 1500, the growing cost of government forced the post-feudal state to raise more revenues. Okay, the return of revenues, power to central government lead to expansion of traditional taxes and the introduction of the new taxes. Most taxes follows the old system, but with the expansion of its scope and the form. So as an expansion, there are now revenues created. Okay, so instead of getting only tax from land, they now add several sources of revenues. One of which is more on tax. We have pool tax, or for professions they can get tax if you work. Then sole tax, widow tax, income tax. These are taxes which we do not think in our time as possible. Okay, what we have in our tax system is we have income tax, sales tax. Okay, so there are other taxes that at the time is very important of the source of their money. Okay, but at the moment we only focus on a very important source of revenue. Okay, but after the French Revolution, a relief from the king's extravagance, a feudal system phased out, and inadequate national finance system was instituted. So it was a breakthrough after the French Revolution, where they observed kings are extravagant, okay, and later on they come up with a better system. Now, after that, in the 15th century, the feudal system was gradually shattered, okay, by a rising of individualism. Okay, because of inequality, now people wanted to be alone, okay, no longer perhaps joining the community. Okay, and what is the result? It became more of an individualism. So it's your own, you become rich only when you are good in business. Okay, factories were built, technology advances appeared, trade increased, goods and services expanded. Okay, a strong central government forged during the time to make the nation state strong again, okay, become an economic concern. So if you are good in business, okay, during the capitalism, you will eventually become rich. And this is what we are doing right now, because there is a progress actually when people are competing in as opposed to communism, where the initiative may be less because people will just depend their source of income in the government. Whereas in capitalism, if you are good in business, you eventually become the richest man in the country. Now, there are three schools of thought evolved at the time. One, we have mercantilism, okay, commercialism, cameralism, and physiocracy. We go first to mercantilism. What is mercantilism? Refers to those, okay, protectionist, okay, and monetary policies which European states pursued during the 16th to 18th centuries in their effort to enrich a great nation by trade and manufactures. So this one is uh, a development of capitalism in which people now pursue economic trade with other countries. The intention is to enrich a country, improve and cultivation of the land. Mercantilism has been expanded to embrace the economic policies of the period between the Middle Ages and the emerged laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is now a new trend where people is given a freedom. The word itself simply means let it be, or let alone, let the people alone. Government should not intervene in the affairs of the people. Just like in a market, the government should not impose the price, because eventually price will be declared later based on supply and demand. But there are times in government at the moment where prices are even dictated. One of that is when there's a crisis, for example, when rice price is very high, which creates a not real price, because businessmen may create their own price actually. For example, if they hoard, like they will not release the rice, they put first in their warehouses, and then they will let the time when the price is high, this is the time that they're going to sell. This is actually illegal because this would create a not real price, because price is an equilibrium between the supply and demand. But if you hoard, the market would think that there is no supply because you keep it. That's why the price is high. But eventually, you intend it to be because you hoard. And government at this time may even intervene by punishing those hoarders or compelling them to sell the price at the real fair value. Now, the beginning of capitalism, okay, we have mercantilism influences the public finance. It highlighted the necessity of state intervention in the economy of the mercantilist country. Okay, as opposed to laissez-faire, if the state will not intervene, the state will just let the people do their part. Okay, actually, in my opinion, there's no need actually of intervening the government by the government. People alone in the market can set the price. Okay, because if your price is high, nobody will buy. Eventually, you will be forced to sell it at lower price. So even without government, still there is market. Okay, so that is opposed by mercantilism, where it states that the state intervention in the economy of mercantilist country. Okay, that it is indeed important that there is an intervention of the government. It expanded the use of fiscal instruments such as a tax and budget to guide the economic activities towards prosperity. So according to that, in order for the country to be developed, okay, the tax and budget must be guided for prosperity. The concern of the mercantile state to preserve and increase its wealth, okay, by active export and corresponding restriction on imports. So take note, the wealth of the country always depend on active export. In fact, there are theory in economics where the income of the country will always be measured on the export. Because if you export, you earn. Okay? As opposed to a country where it always imports. Okay? In the Philippines right now, there are things that we export, but most of the things in our country are imported, which means that if you base on the principle that the country is considered developed if it exports, then we fall short of that because most of our commodities right now is imported from other countries. Now, there is also a tax on imports. We call it as tariff. Okay, tariff is a burden actually imposed on imported products. Okay, it showed the real economic prosperity of a nation laid on development of agriculture and industry and not on acquisition of gold only. Okay, this is the feature of a capitalism where there is indeed pure prosperity. At the time, the measure of wealth is based on gold, but in a capitalist concept, the measure of wealth is now based on economic prosperity when you export. Now, the beginning of capitalism, there is a word commercialism, commercialism rather, which is the second to the three school of thought. Okay, so like mercantilism, it was concerned with how to make the state powerful and wealthy. In general, when we talk about this concept, there's only one concept they have in mind. Do you want a country to be powerful and wealthy, or to be wealthy? Because if you are wealthy, necessarily it follows that you are powerful. However, unlike the mercantilists who equally emphasize on the accumulation of wealth through a restrictive trade, cameralists advocated efficient administration and control of economic activities to develop the nation's resources. Okay, so this is a new trend. Right now, the focus, in fact, this is still applicable in the present time, where the administration, government wanted to control the activities, okay, by developing the resources. because the wealth of the nation actually comes from, well, the resources we have. Okay, the people. If our people are talented enough, perhaps we can become a great country. Look at history. People or a country becomes great because they are bright. Okay, if you look at history, the brightest people like Greeks, followed by Romans, these are the greatest, and in fact they are colonized at the time. Okay, during the time of Julius Caesar. Later on, the glory was stripped by Prussia. Okay, Germans are dominant and they become powerful. Then we have the Spain and Britain. Spain and Portugal, Britain later on become powerful, colonized countries, and lately we have America as the greatest country. Okay, the bottom line there is that these countries are bright, they are good in technology. So Britain become great because they're great. Their navy is the best. Okay, America right now is the best because they have fighter planes. They can colonize other country or engage into a war, declare war, just to show power. Okay, and other countries as well become an ally because, well, they want also protection. So who knows, later on Philippines will become great. Okay, so with that common denominator of intelligence, perhaps we can become one of those great countries. Maybe in the near future, perhaps 50 years from now or 100 from now, 100 years from now. Okay, perhaps other state, if there will be state, will be formed later on through federalism. It might become a country. Right now, we are one country, Philippines, but later on, if you look at history, these are divided. This will be divided. Okay, perhaps Leyte or Bohol, for example, might become the greatest country. We don't know. It might become a country. Okay, so because history, the great country would come and go. Okay, history is, they say, is keeps on changing. It moves in time, and we don't know what will happen next. Okay, so the other is physiocracy. Okay, the physiocrats agreed that the only way to institute a stable system of taxation was to base on its sector, on a sector which produced the net profit or surplus. Okay, so according to them, the sector which produces profit or surplus, they look into this sector which produces profit and surplus, and that is their focus. Other than that, they may not be important. To ensure the sanctity of revenues, they argued all taxes should be abolished, okay, and a single direct tax on the land rent income generated from agricultural production is instituted. So they abolished all except one, which is very crucial, and in fact it is a milking cow of their country, of the country itself, is the tax on land rent. Okay, in feudal system or even during the time of Spain, all the lands that they colonized belong to the king. Okay, and in fact in law we call it as a regalian doctrine. Okay, all lands, even if you have your own title, you have to surrender it to the king if it is needed. Okay, in fact when the Spanish left the country, all lands is owned by the king of Spain. Okay, they presume that if the land is not titled, it is owned by the king of Spain. So later on, there are lands which are given to friars because of their contribution in colonizing and propagating the Christianity, and we call it as the friar lands. Okay, so friar lands was later on declared by this government to be owned now by government. So all friar lands is now under the title of Philippine government. To them, the agricultural surplus was the best foundation of a lasting system of taxation. Okay, so their focus is on agriculture. In fact, there is a economist would say that the the genuine development is a development of agriculture. Okay, but in our time, the focus is different. It's more on export and import. Now, okay, so the capitalism still, okay, public finance and free enterprise changes industrial transactions. Okay, land-based transaction for the capitalist and the worker feudal lord and the tenant laissez-faire policy mercantilist philosophy. Okay, these are the topics which is important and we will discuss each. There are contributors of capitalism. Okay, we will start with the first one, a very famous, in fact, was considered to be the father of economics. Okay, or specifically classical economics. He advocated that the policy of a minimum government control on the business activities, okay, or laissez-faire, meaning that there should be a less control on business. Let the people do their share. Just leave the people what they're doing. Okay, the regulations reduce wealth. He advised against large-scale borrowing, okay, and deficit spending. He promoted the idea of a balanced budget. Government should limit its expenditures. Okay, that is his idea. But later on there are theories which if you spend your income on expenditure, eventually it will generate fund and create jobs. Okay, but according to him, it's better if government should limit the expenditures. So meaning that you get only the money but no projects at all. While private sector should provide needs for the society through market mercantilism. So government will keep the money, but private sector will produce the money. Okay, how? Through tax. Where do they get the tax? From market. When they transact business, then if there's an income, of course, income partly goes to government in the form of tax. So according to Adam Smith, we should limit the expenditure. How about Ricardo? Okay, David Ricardo. What is his contribution? He was credited for his theory of distribution of tax burden. Okay, so this is very famous that the burden now of tax is based on your income. It is no longer uniform. That if you have higher income, then the higher the tax. So his concepts become one of the basis of the institution of equality and uniformity in the modern taxation and progressive tax structure. This is what we follow in the Philippines, a progressive tax structure, which states that if you have higher income, then the higher the tax that you're going to pay. So, of course, I'm sure you have the idea how to compute tax. It's always based on the status, married, single, or head of the family, and your bracket. If your income falls into that, and lately, by the way, if your income is less than 200,000 per year, how to compute it? Simply multiply your monthly salary to 12. If it cannot reach 200,000, then it is exempt from taxation. If it is higher than that, then there is a corresponding bracket. Okay, it starts first from the lower tax and then going higher. If your income is now very high, then perhaps your tax would reach up to 30%, 30 plus. Now, there is a bracket for that, okay, the tax base and the tax bracket. But the computation of which it will take an hour for you to understand it. But as a a glimpse of it, it is good to know at this moment, okay, that indeed a tax is based on progressive tax structure. The higher the income, the higher the salary, because it would be unfair if we all have similar income, let's say 2,000, and if your income is only 2,000, eventually you have no money to take you home. Everything will just be paid for tax. So that would be inequality. Now, another contributor of capitalism, we have Adolf Wagner, okay, 1835 to 1917. He emphasized the state should eliminate rather inequalities of wealth through fiscal measures. Okay, so if you understand the concept of government, it's actually an instrument that will bridge the gap between rich and poor. Okay, in a way, government will provide a system which would bridge this through tax and other incentives and projects that will benefit perhaps the poor. Okay, so it was Adolf Wagner, okay, who eliminates inequality of wealth through fiscal measures. Tax in itself actually eliminates. Okay, the use of fiscal policy for distributive goals in modern times partly originated from his theory. Okay, so by that you understand that it was actually Wagner who think it over the problem of society, which is inequality, and the only way to solve inequality is to come up with a fiscal measures which will bridge the gap between rich and the poor. Another, John Stuart Mill. Okay, this might end. I don't know how many times left. There's only 5 minutes more. Okay, if this will end, then perhaps we'll just see you next meeting. But I'm going to post some of the discussion in the Google Classroom. Now, another is the idea of John Stuart Mill, very famous for his utilitarianism, but in economics he contributed. He advocates the laissez-faire. He contributed to public finance from his correlation of the function of the state to public expenditures. Okay, so there must be a correlation, meaning an importance of the function of government and the public expenditure. He justified government intervention as in public expenditure for the welfare of the state. Okay, the expenditure, public spending or expenditure like projects and other social services, it must be for the welfare of the state. Okay, so well, maybe we can think it over. Did the state right now follow the idea of John Stuart Mill? Okay, so let's jump to the last one. Okay, before I go to Marx, because the discussion of Marx might it might take me 2 hours. Now we go first to the last before Marx, Keynesian public finance, okay, as proposed by John Maynard Keynes in 1883 to 1946. On public finance, he insisted that government could and should intervene the economic activities. Okay, he developed a concept of fiscal policy as a tool, okay, for correcting imbalances in the economy. So what is the job of fiscal administration? Is actually to balance, okay, the gap between rich and poor, and there should be balance in the economy, not just only few will benefit. Okay, later on we're going to discuss what are these projects in which it might only be benefiting few. Okay, he encouraged a deficit financing. A public borrowing could fulfill economic objectives. So, well, in fact, it is him who advocated that we have to borrow money if it's needed for or to meet the economic objectives. and stimulate economic development. Okay, for example, in crisis, people will no longer be buying. They just keep the money. They not put it in the bank. What did they do? What should the government do? In some countries, like during the um, depression, what they did is they gave money to the people. They call it as stimulus fund. Okay, they just give the money for you to use the money and let the economy function again, move. Because there's actually a cycle. Like when you have money, you buy, the people earn, then the part of that earnings then goes to tax. So there is a cycle of economy. But if people will not spend, then the economy will eventually stagnate and there is no more progress. So the economy will eventually die. So it was him. It was Keynes who said that the economy must be stimulated. Okay. He introduced the concept of government fiscal management within the context of capitalism. So there must be few people who is the source of income. The concept of mixed economy serve the basic tool for both industrialized and developing countries. So that is applicable to both economic, highly industrialized, and or developing countries.